101.2 KWYO, The Boys Show. Good morning, Wyoming faithful. It's 11 a.m. on a beautiful September 24th morning here in Laramie. Jack Sable here on a special bi-week edition of The Boys Show, and let's jump straight into it because we've got a lot to get into and a lot of questions to dive in. But first, let's talk about that ugly game in Idaho last week. Fortunately, only 2,500 people showed up for that stinker, but that was by no stretch of the imagination an interesting game, and I'm just surprised that Wyoming struggled as bad as they did against Idaho of all teams. Only 182 total yards on offense, and that would have been the big story had Idaho not one-up them by only putting up 47 total yards on offense. I mean, come on, even LSU put up at least 90 against Alabama in the BCS National Championship game. How do you even fathom under 50? That's impossible. That is such a mind-blowing stat. That's like the equivalent of an NBA team only managing to score 40 points. That's just not possible. No wonder they're going independent next year because they're just awful. But back to the Cowboys offense last week. I mean, they looked amazing out of the gate. I seriously thought that this was going to be a 35-point blowout with the way that they were clicking in the first half. Brett Smith looked sharp. The running attack was very balanced and effective. Your backup tackle was scoring touchdowns. It just felt like they set the tone in the game and they were dictating Idaho. And then I don't know what happened to them in the second half. And that's really been the story of this team thus far. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde on offense. It's just 3 and out after 3 and out, risky throws, and lack of execution. And at this point, I gotta point the finger at Mashburn. I know it's difficult to really take shots at the guy who thus far has the team at 3-1 and nearly upset currently number 16 Texas, who's undefeated still. But Wyoming can't afford to be that ineffective on offense when they need to close out games. And I can only say that it seems like a coaching/play call issue, and he's got to fix that. But one thing he certainly doesn't have to fix is that defense. I can't say enough about them. And even though that Idaho team is very, very bad, they made them look even worse. Held them to under 10 yards on total offense in the first half. They look like a swarm out there. The tackling looked a little bit tighter this week, and Mashburn has really committed to this gambling blitz style of play on defense. It gives everyone on that field a chance to make a play, either in the secondary or if you're a rusher. And it's the first 3-4 defense that I've ever seen that really doesn't fully rely on its outside linebackers to generate a pass rush. They don't act as if they're, like 2 extra defensive ends. It's everyone that comes in and makes a play on the run or the pass, whether you're a safety, a linebacker, or a lineman. So far this season, it has been a decent start for this Wyoming team. They should be very proud right now, sitting at 3-1. Brett Smith is having a fair year thus far, statistically not explosive, but I think that's more of a result of the offense, which is a time of possession controlling style, which leads to the run game, which has been a remarkable disappointment. They came alive a little bit against Idaho, but it's befuddling that they've played in each of the first 4 games in the college football season and are still third from last in rushing. That's embarrassing. I thought that this heavy style of offense would have really gotten it going, but there just hasn't been a lot of big rushing gains throughout the season. And most of the big rushing gains that we've had have been doomed by holding penalties. I think it's a mix of the offensive line and the actual rushing attack itself that's the problem. Receivers have been excellent thus far, and Brandon Miller has been better used in the passing game than in the running game. Tight end Spencer Bruce is the favorite target thus far, but surprisingly, the distribution has been fairly even throughout the season. Ruffin is the biggest standout, however, because he has hit a bunch of home run plays this year. And the defense this season has been a total terror squad. And Zacha leads all defenders in tackles with 22 tackles, usually a bad sign when your safety is your leading tackler. But when he has 6 tackles for a loss and 2 sacks, that rule goes out of the window immediately. 2 interceptions to boot. Kid's a freak of nature, 6'3", 220 pounds, and just moved to strong safety this year after playing linebacker last year. He's been the leader of this defense thus far, and his homeland of Germany would be very proud of him. Should also mention he has a little brother here as well, Eric, who's currently a freshman wide receiver on this team. Hope he gets some playing time in the near future. Let's go ahead and shift gears into recruiting, and then we'll get into your questions for the week. Really, only 2 prospects I want to talk about this week because they're from the Equality State, and they both just had absolutely stellar games. Nicholas Prep faced off against Rock Springs High this past Friday, a game that I actually got to enjoy and watch, and it gave me a chance to see Nicholas Prep's tight end Sean Williams and the big boy Dan Washington of Rock Springs, which are 2 recruits that Mashburn has high on his list. Sean Williams had a 200-plus yard performance today, and that's remarkable for a tight end. And Washington, or Rumble Pack as his teammates call him, had 300-plus yards on the ground. It was really quite a show to watch. Dan gets the nickname because, much like the N64 attachment, he will rumble if you try to get your hands around him. And boy, he dragged defenders with him the entire game. Even when they could get him down, it easily took 2, 3, 4 guys to do so. If you were soft, he told you to get off of him. And if you were the lucky one guy who could bring him down on your own, he made you work for it and he dragged you about an extra 4 yards. He is a true head down, run through you power runner. And Sean Williams shows that he has some hands to go with that speed. He did drop the ball 2 times, but when you make 10 plus catches in a game, it's very easy to forget that. Deep threat receiver, which is really weird to say about a tight end, but he's got some wheels. I actually think he and Dan Washington are about the same speed, which is bad to say for Dan, but very, very good to say about Sean. He makes sideline catches look so easy, and with somebody that's that versatile, I feel bad for any linebacker, safety, or corner that has to cover that 6'3", 240 frame. Tons of potential, and he could be a very nice compliment to Spencer Bruce next year if he's not redshirted. Despite Washington's huge effort out of that game, Nicholas Prep went on to win 59-45. On to the question round for this bye week. We actually have some callers on standby. I'll take a couple before we jump into the comment section questions. Han from Colorado, you're on the air.
Hey, Jack. Thanks for having me on air. I wanted to know what you think the possibilities are that Sam Marshburn moves Evan Tolbert to tight end if he signs with us.
I don't think he will unless he redshirts Tolbert. Spencer Bruce would still have another year next year, so he wouldn't have to make that big of a shift, and I'm more than positive that Mashburn will be aggressive in getting another tight end in next year's recruiting class.
Does he come and play as a true freshman next year?
I think he redshirts him. I know he wants a goal line threat, but I'm still a solid believer in the fact that we have some decent depth at wide receiver on this team and not just an oversaturation at the position. But whenever he does finally see playing time, I could see him causing a ton of havoc in the Mountain West if he does come to Wyoming. One last caller. This is Lucas from Rock Springs. You're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, hi, Lucas. You're on the air.
Oh, awesome. I'm on the air. Hey, Jack, you think in the next couple of years, the Smashburn defense could get the Cowboys into a BCS bowl game or better conference in the future?
This has been such a hot topic question ever since Mashburn has gotten here, and I think that people may be jumping the gun a little bit too early with this. Like I said last week, I think that the best possibility that I see in the next couple of years is the Big 12 or the Big East taking this team with the huge shakeup, if this team is good enough. But even Boise State, who's on another level in this conference, still hasn't left this conference. I think that this conference is good enough and that if a team goes undefeated in here, they're in a BCS bowl game, easily. Undefeated equals BCS in this conference. So do they really need to move out of a conference? Probably not if they're good enough. Could the offense get them in a BCS bowl game? That can definitely happen, especially if they have the talent to run it. I don't think that's that far of a stretch, but just not as soon as people think.
So you don't think that they could be in a BCS bowl game in 4 years?
4 years may be a bit too early. Mashburn would have just finished assembling his own team from each class, senior to freshman. The year after that, I think it's fair to start talking about it because he would have assembled the team he wants. But I think 4 years is just a bit too early. Thanks for the call, though. Okay, let's look at our comments section here, and we'll take 2 more questions. First one is from Sir Sports Guy. He asked, what do you think the biggest strength and weakness is of this Wyoming team? Well, right now, the biggest weakness, as I've stated before, is the run game in my mind. And I think that's probably their biggest problem on offense coming down the stretch. I mean, when you're playing with the lead, you want to be able to get your run game going. Averaging under 70 yards a game on the ground isn't getting it done. And that's probably why the offense stalls so much in the third and fourth quarter. Biggest strength is their defense, by far. The scheme is beautiful to watch, and I haven't really seen a defense cost them or put them out of a game. In fact, the defense has saved them more often than not, except when they need to tackle. Last question. The lucky person is Snowmoss. His question is, 2 of Wyoming's biggest weaknesses seem to be the third quarter performance and protecting the quarterback. What is Coach Mashburn doing to resolve these? That is a great question. And this really seemed to kind of be the most popular question in the comments section. And Smith certainly did struggle making some of his throws. He was overthrowing receivers and making bonehead mistakes like that punt that he threw to Chris McNeil against Idaho. I'm sure he's going over discipline and protection with his offense, especially with Nevada coming up next week, because that is a huge game. But like I just said, their biggest problem, to me, that is that running game. Protection and blocking certainly do play a role in that. But when you're playing with the lead and you're forced to pass because you can't get anything going on the run, you're going to hurt yourself and make yourself predictable. Defenses know what to defend against, and it becomes much harder to milk the clock. I think if they can figure that out, Brett Smith's job becomes much easier down the stretch. It's the only solution I can think of, and I hope that Mashburn is at least listening to the show this week. He knows that I have a ton of respect for him, but this is the solution that I can think of to stop all those woes. You have to make the running game work and get it going. Mountain West Conference action kicks off next week for Wyoming as the Cowboys are 3-1 thus far this year, third in the conference, and will be taking on the first place team, Nevada, next week. Number 6 defense in the nation takes on that dangerous pistol offense of the Wolfpack. What will happen? Who knows? I'm hoping for a win, though, as we head back out on the road next week. You're listening to 101.2 KWYO, The Boys Show. We'll be back.